Just coming off playing Terran. I guess there's some race switching allowed in this tournament. I'm not sure on the specifics, but yeah. Pretty cool beans. Okie doke. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Starbow Ladder Cup #1. This is still a best of one. There's going to be a couple more best of ones before we get into the best of threes. But before we even do the introductions, guys, I do want to remind you all to take a moment to check out starbowmod.com for more information about the mod. Check out the ladder, because none of these guys just signed up for free. This isn't like a big amateur tournament. No, you have to have some rankings on the ladder in order to play today, and we have some pretty good players lined up as we get further into the brackets, as there's been seeding done. But for now, spawning in the top right corner of Fighting Spirits, hoo-ha! It's gonna be My Insanity's Slayerofpony. And in the top left, he's Terran, and a man with an abbreviation for a name, unless his name is snftmd. It's gonna be snftmd. Supernova Foot Medical Doctor. That's probably not his real name. But how sick would that be if I was right with that guess? So we just saw Slayerofpony play Terran, guys. It's worth noting he's now playing Zerg. I guess this was a very intentional thing and not a race mix-up, or we would have perhaps had a remake by now. That's why I was a little hesitant on that load screen. A little bit curious if we're just going to quickly get out of the game. But nope, intentionally so playing Zerg. I guess perhaps doesn't like mirror matchups. Perhaps just prefers this matchup in general. There used to be a lot of race switchers in regular StarCraft 2. Light and Morrow and a couple others do come to mind, but Kawhi Rice, of course, towards the end of his career. But yeah, for the most part, we haven't seen race switching in a long time, and I do think it's kind of neat if you play each race well enough. But of course, I guess the mentality of a lot of players is like, let's perfect one race better than the rest. Now, I'm not sure if race switching is going to be allowed in the best of threes. I'll have to ask the admins and look into that. But of course, WCS is they allow race switching, but the rule is like you can't swap in the series. So game 1 you can't play Zerg, game 2 you can't play Terran type thing and swap back and forth between the two. But you can do your series 1 as Zerg and series 2 as Terran type thing. I'm not too clear on the specifics of how that pertains to this tournament, but we'll find out. Now, one thing that's worth noting is in the several Starbow Cup casts I've done in the past, like it's pretty much been mech all the way. There's been a couple of bio pushes that I've seen work as a Terran player, but the reality is lurkers are pretty damn good in this matchup. And if there's one thing that's better than banelings and cleaning up a ton of marines, it's a couple of well-placed lurkers. So we'll see if that comes into effect or not. snftmd may just end up going straight to mech, as tanks and vultures are quite fantastic. It's kind of funny too, like Hydralisks are so good in StarCraft 2. Like you watch a Hydralisk, you're like, okay, end game unit, GG, does so much damage. But in Starbow, not quite the case. They've moved to tier 1. They're pretty darn good generally, but they're not the most OP units in the game by any means. It's worth noting too, I guess, if you're newer to Starbow and this isn't like, if this is your first pony show, I guess. I say with the grimace reading this name. Creep works differently for Zerg. Queens work differently for Zerg. We'll talk about those in a second, but the Creep's the one I want to talk about the most, because you'll still see Creep spread. It's an effective way to get map control and vision, but Creep doesn't provide movement speed bonuses like it does in StarCraft 2. Not that that's the biggest deal, because they kind of traded out. I believe someone said that they you actually get regen for it now. I can't confirm that, but it's still kind of cool that they've changed the mechanics of Creep. When you talk about unit balance and design for StarCraft 2, Creep is kind of the last thing I typically end up thinking of, but neat nonetheless. Now you'll notice as I select the Swarm Queen, as we keep an eye around the map here, it's got no innate attack. That's because it uses an ability in Rage, and I believe the energy cost got increased recently, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 35 now instead of 25. So, Queen actually does a lot of damage while enraged, but it's an on-activate ability, and it will cost you energy. So, unfortunately, it's not something you can have active all the time if you're constantly trying to do injects, or nurturing swarms, or spreading creep, or what have you. There's a couple of the other mechanics key and worth noting here is the way injects were changed in Starbow. This is actually a huge deal. First off, before I explain why, it encourages expansions, which I think are cool, but also more macro hatcheries. As, nice little catch in that SCV. As nurturing swarm, larva inject no longer creates those eggs and pops out 3 larvae at a time, but instead kind of acts almost like a chrono boost. It hastens the rate at which normal larvae are produced. So you're also not going to have that bank of like 700 larvae you'd love to have off of one hatchery. Now we got the Spire coming up. Spire's always a good move. I like the position of it, kind of. It looks a little bit scary defensively, because you could have Siege Tank Siege up here, for example. But if snftmd, that name's going to be really difficult to say throughout the course of this game, throws down scans, he's not going to see anything in the main, he's not going to see anything in the natural. It's an offbeat, strange location for it. But one Spinecaller in position will chunk away at these Vultures. Now, unlike Hellions, it's not like you line up the drones and lose them all. But Vultures do hit pretty darn hard. Neither of these Queens are enraging. In fact, not quite positioned on the ramp in a way to deal with this. Oh man, that one Queen tore down that Vulture, but still, a couple Lings trying to run away from this. Vultures are kind of the anti-Ling unit though, so we do see units die, and Queens are... Well, this one's going to run out of its enrage, but still the Vulture's running around the base. This other Queen can enrage in about 1 second. There we go. May need to. Still bleeding out drones here. Really needs to clean up these Vultures. There you go. Rage goes off, and looks like with Metabolic Boost, these should be able to eventually chunk this away. I mean, one Vulture can try and hit run, I guess, but gets the scout on the Spire as he dies. Actually, that's quite key and really nice, worth catching, because again, when you play mech, and it looks like, for now, SNFTMD is, you don't have a lot of anti-air. So we don't have a ton of biodown. We don't have Marines available with any form of stim pack, much less, what's it, barrel stabilizers or anything like that. So what's going to happen here, key and primarily, is, well, first off, these turrets are going to come down. This is fantastically and important. Not only that, but necessary. I like the wall off, too. This is going to make sure that nothing can run by while he's running around trying to clean up the Mutalisks, but Goliaths don't have the best anti-air capabilities. Marines are not going to be numerous enough to really effectively deal with this, and I guess Vikings are okay, but Vikings are still not the same amount of effectiveness as, say, like a Thor would be. But there's no Thors in Starbow is the problem. The best way to deal with giant Mutalisk clumps, of course, is to use Irradiate. For those who don't know what that is, Science Vessel has been brought back into Starbow. Resurrected from Brood War, if you will. No chance to make one anytime soon, of course. It doesn't have the armor, doesn't have a tech lab or anything like that. But Irradiate basically will guarantee kill one biological unit, period, but also deal a ton of AoE around it. So kind of like an immolation aura type effect. And, well, Mutalisk clump, and they'll feel the heat. Still, this low count of Mutalisk is not that scary. The Vikings alone should be able to deal with this, combined with the Goliaths. Do they have Charon? They don't have their Charon upgrades yet for the range bonus on those missiles, but still an adequate source of anti-air. Now, unfortunately, if SNFTMD plays like this, very defensively, gets Goliaths, builds turrets, he's never really going to expand towards that third. And in Starbow, that's actually okay. You're not going to lose the game because you're stuck on 2 bases in Starbow. You will certainly hurt for it, and your economy won't be nearly as good as your opponent's, but you can still play off of it, as each of these mineral patches is a little more effective than a normal mineral patch in StarCraft 2. So you'll still have the income to make a sizable army. The difference is going to come down to whether you can remake that army or not. Okay. Nobody's Carapace finishing up for that Overlord speed. Also makes Overseers a lot faster. Overseers otherwise move very slow in Starbow. There's a pretty healthy Mutalisk count. We do see the investment in Hydralisks, but this will probably be a combination of Hydralisks eventually changing into Lurkers. I don't believe we have a Lurker den available just yet. No, probably do it after he finishes the ranged upgrades. But yeah, one thing I'm concerned about is no intention to go towards Science Vessels so far by the looks of it. Again, not that this is a terrible thing, but as we see, missile turrets aren't really going to cover the range of this command center. I mean, it'll protect the mineral line, but I guess if the Mutalisks were dedicated enough, they could probably eventually kill the SCVs through splash damage. Glaive worms, if you will. Yeah, more depots coming down, and creeps just spreading across the map like wildfire. Slayerofpony's gonna have a ton of vision, where SNFTMD is just gonna be kind of boxed into his base. You know, the Mutalisks can be really good. The problem is they're not as good as they are in StarCraft 2. They don't quite have that OP like critical mass number. And it's kind of good too, because there's no Widowmice, there's no Thors, there's no great way to deal with that outside of Irradiate. But we do see the Vikings trying to respond. Slayerofpony being very nice at, I guess, not really getting. Well, I love watching the new Viking missile attacks in Starbow. The Mutalisks are not really getting a lot of harass done. In fact, I don't think like any workers have even really died this game. But they're kind of keeping SNFTMD back. Finally pushing it on the map a little bit here is going to be a big mistake, because there's a lot of Hydralisks waiting for these Vultures. Combined with the siege tanks. And, I mean, realistically, outside of this army, only a couple of these units actually need to die for all of a sudden Slayerofpony to have a huge lead. But we see a Viper nest coming down behind this. This is always a strange thing to see. We'll talk about that more in a moment as the fight does begin. We got the Vikings going to siege on top of these, or not the Viking siege, the siege tanks siege on top of this army, but the Hydralisks could just be a little too much en masse, focusing down the ground units. Vikings now landing to take the fight. Meatloaf's have been fully cleared up, doesn't have that to worry about, but there's just too many Hydralisks. So hightailing back to his base, snftmd tries to lift off. Not going to be the case though. Now the Vipers actually are a weird change to this game. I don't imagine he's making the Viper nest specifically to make Vipers, but it may end up making one or two of them, as they've got some cool unique mechanics associated with them. The biggest thing about Viper changes though, like we're probably not going to see any, so I'm just going to touch on this briefly, is they've still got the Abduct, but they don't have the Blinding Cloud anymore. That ability's kind of been changed over, swapped around, and given to the Defiler through Dark Swarm. Now that's kind of like your Zerg in-game caster unit that's just, quite frankly, can be really OP. Whether we get to see them or not is going to be another question altogether, but for now, these vultures will be eradicated. So I just chased them back. There's some spider mines here, but again, spider mines are no threat to workers, so the drones can transfer, drones can mine. It really won't be a problem. I'm a little surprised we see the reinvestment in Mutalisks, though. I'm not a big fan of this. He saw that his Mutalisk count was okay, but, I mean, realistically, unless you get a huge investment of these, it's not going to be worth it. Like, 10 Mutalisks is cool for picking off drops. 15 is okay for taking like skirmishes in the middle of the map type thing. But even in Starbow, that number doesn't change much, where you need like 30 plus to be anything really deadly or scary. Finally, Irradiate on the way. This is really nice, actually. So the Science Vessel and the Irradiate are kind of like your key anti-Zerg type units. Ability, I guess. Oh, hang on. Big run by coming down here. This could cost him a lot of workers. These vultures don't even need to attack this Spinecrawler, but looks like Milos will clean this up. snftmd gonna get a couple of workers here, but yeah, really not too many extra go down for the cost of that. Really, really expensive for us. But anyways, the Science Pistols have two major abilities that really affect Zerg more than anything else. One is, of course, Radiate, which I've already explained a little bit. It's like this immolation aura you apply to one unit. It can kill a lot of Mutalisks, or it'll just take a unit from full to dead, like a Lurker, for example. It provides detection, which is cool. That's not what I want to talk about. The Nerve Jammer is a really cool ability that I haven't got to see a lot of use out of, but I think has great potential. Now, unless in a recent patch they changed it over, I should actually look and see. Do they still have Nerve Jammer? Okay. I'm always worried they've changed something. Nerve Jammer is a cool ability. What it does is like it puts a circle down that's probably about this big. It's really not too large of a radius, but any units inside of it deal 75% less damage. Oh, sorry, they've been changed to 50% less damage. And burrowed units have their damage only affected by 25%, so burrowed units being specifically lurkers. Anyways, you drop a Nerve Jammer down, all of a sudden these Hydralisks go from being incredibly scary death ball to, okay, they need to get out of there, or they're just realistically doing no damage. Unfortunately, it does, as of last game I cast, affect your own units as well. So you do have to be careful with your positioning of it. Last thing you want to do is put a Nerve Jammer down and then walk all your Goliaths into it. At any rate, we're going to see that Irradiate come into effect here, I imagine. Got to go down on top of these Mutalisks. He doesn't have the anti-air this time. There we go, that green glow of death. He will segment out that one weak Mutalisk, though. I like that choice, so the other ones will still be primed and pristine to fight later. Command Center goes down / almost Planetary Fortress. Army in full retreat. snftmd just bleeding out units right now. Keep that Science Vessel alive, man. You need to retreat that. Oh, unless you're just going to tap out. Good game is going to be called, and Slayerofpony will move on into brackets. 2 rounds back-to-back to Starbow Ladder Cup. We'll see how he does in round number 3, where his opponents, I believe, is going to be Starcraft, unless I've been told otherwise. Unless I'm going to be corrected and told otherwise.